Hey everyone, this is BrettFish Anderson. Welcome to the third bonus part of this Out of the Fishbowl series where we are looking at tips for white people who are asking, what can I do about anti-racism? And let's start right off with a quote from Angela Davis that says, in a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist, we must be anti-racist. And basically what she's talking about is it's not enough to not be the bad thing, but we need to be prepared to stop the bad thing or to interrupt the bad thing or to work to change those who are caught in the old mindsets and who are stuck, who haven't realized what privilege is about, who haven't seen the need for change. And so as we go into the third set of 10 tips for white people, we're going to go a little bit deeper. And we're going to be talking a bit about how do we work on our anti-racism. And maybe some of the tips up till now have been non-racism, but now we're going to be stepping a little bit further, a little bit deeper. If you've made it this far, then keep going. And if you haven't, go back and look at the episode, The Amazing Race, and watch the first 20 tips and ideas, because these are going to build on those. They're going to go a little bit deeper, and let's jump right into it. So just before we jump into the last 10 tips of this series, I want to just briefly look at this idea of why Black Lives Matter is a necessary thing. And maybe a good way to explain it is through the lens of Heartlines, which is the NGO that I work with. We have a program called Fathers Matter. If you step into any room or school or office building in South Africa and you ask the question, do mothers matter? Everybody's going to put up their hand. Unless somebody's had a particularly bad experience with a mother, 99.9% of people, thumbs up, mothers matter. But if you ask the same or similar question and just pose it as, do fathers matter? We've often found that people are a little bit more hesitant to put up their hands, or the hands don't go as high, and a lot of the hands don't go up because we've got a fathering problem in this country. And so in the same way, like for Heartlines, the program has become Fathers Matter because we need to declare that's true. We need to start seeing it to be true and working towards it being a true thing. And so when we come to Black Lives Matter, we don't need a hashtag White Lives Matter because white lives have always mattered. That's the point. White lives have generally been lifted above black lives and brown lives and made to be superior, definitely in South Africa, but also in various places around the world. And so nobody has ever had to fight for the needs of white people because white people aren't being prejudiced against because they are white. And a lot of people are kind of struggling with this idea as we start working towards equality. And white people that have had all the privileges, that have had all the money and the land and the bonuses and that, when things start becoming equal, a lot of us can get this feeling that we're losing stuff, but we're not losing stuff. It's just becoming a lot more equal. And so we need to continue this idea of Black Lives Matter because in so many places and spaces and situations, Black lives haven't mattered. We look at colonialism, we look at slavery, we look at apartheid, Jim Crow laws, all of those kind of things. There have been so many places where black lives have not mattered or have been shown to matter less. And so that's why we talk about Black Lives Matter. But let's jump in 10 more tips that I think are going to make it easier for you, that are going to make the world a better place around us, especially for people that don't look like us, and hopefully help us to interact with people better around us. And point number 21 is quite simple. Support black business. And that might be confusing to you offhand, but I think for me, one good example is the Twitterer, as I call it. Some people call it X, Twitter, whatever it is. But in those spaces, there are often places where a variety of people are doing entrepreneurial things. People have cooking businesses or they share their plumbing businesses, CV, but all these kind of things online. And one way that we can start to redress the way things have been in the past is to actively seek out black businesses and support them. And so if you've got an option between things, look for somebody that's up and coming, look for somebody that's struggling to get going. We can either support them directly by buying the things they are on offer, or we can simply share and tag people and join the dots so that people that are looking for the services they're offering can find them. And so that's quite an easy one. Support black business. And again, when we're saying support black business, we're not saying avoid supporting white business. We're just saying be more intentional about finding businesses that are local and supporting them. Point number 22 is one or two things together. I've got to invite someone who doesn't look like you for a story sharing opportunity, and then invite someone of a different race to your house for a meal. And so this kind of builds on things we've spoken about. We've spoken about listening. We've spoken about trying to kind of learn from let Black and other voices be the ones that inform us. But this is about taking it to that next level. This is about starting to build community, about starting to build friendship. And so invite somebody to share their story. And I want to give this caveat to that. We cannot add the burden of dealing with our anti-racism to Black and brown people. Because I've heard a lot of the time, or over these last 15 years when I've been grappling with this stuff, like a white person will go to a Black person and say, help me not to be racist. And then the Black person just gets another job. They have to do the work all over again. And so as we're working through these things, there might be times where we want to speak to a Black friend or an ally or colleague and just check how we're doing and say, like, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I'm looking at, is it okay? But we've got to be very careful that we don't put the burden of dealing with our anti-racism onto Black and brown people. And so even this idea of inviting somebody to share their story, inviting someone of a different race to our house for a meal, that might be a good idea, but it also might be something that a Black or brown person might not be interested in until we've built some relationship with them. Once you've got good relationship with somebody, you can invite them to your house for a meal. And so I think with this thing, the idea is to look at who are the people that sit around your dinner table, who are the people you hang out with. If you go for coffee with somebody, are those people always white? And if they are, let's start shaking that up. And we spoke about the white spaces that you occupy. This is taking it to another level when it comes to a house, when it comes to maybe inviting a Black friend for a walk and just saying, hey, would you mind sharing some of your story? What's it been like for you to live in South Africa? And maybe if we're talking to some older Black people, there might be stories of them having lived in apartheid. And again, we've got to be very careful that we're not asking other people to drag up their trauma to teach us or inform us or entertain us or anything like that. So we've got to be very careful how we couch this. But it's the thing of reaching out to someone and saying, hey, I'm on this journey. I'm really trying to understand race better. I'd love to hear your story. Or, hey, would you mind sharing some of how you grew up or some of what it's been like? I know Cape Town can be a struggle for people. I personally feel like we're probably the most racist province in the country, which is challenging. And so for some friends that have moved from Joburg down here, like what's it been like living or even visiting as a Black person in Cape Town? I've learned a lot from just listening to stories of how people arrive, how people are perceived, and it goes beyond race. We hear about how Cape Town can be cliquey. We hear some race stuff. There's a variety of things. But it's about stepping towards someone and inviting story, inviting the breaking of bread. 23, treat those who work for you as human. And that's you're gonna be like, take a step back, like, wait, Brett, what are you insinuating? And the basic of that, there's a bunch of ways that we can do this. In the old days in particular, and I imagine this probably still happens in some places, if you had a person cleaning your house or if you had somebody working in your garden, then typically a lot of families, a lot of houses would have special bowls and mugs and cups for, inverted commas, those people, for the help. And there's something dehumanizing in a way about having, like, this is the stuff we eat off, but you get that second rate, because it's not people putting their best stuff out for the people that are working for them, right? It's usually something, maybe the cracked plate or the broken one or the plastic one or something lesser than. And so in simple ways, it can be about inviting someone to have the same kind of coffee as you do or having a meal and sharing it with them. But going beyond that, like what I really want to look at in terms of treat those who work for you as human, is this question of living wage versus minimum wage. And if you've never heard those words, you've never thought about this is an opportunity for you to start thinking about it. And it's really answering this question. If somebody of color works for me, and this should be like if anyone works for me, not what can I get away with, but what do they need? And so typically we try, or there's the sense of, let me try pay them as little as I can. I find out what the neighbors are paying them and I can get away with that. But let's sit with the people that are working for us and work out, if I'm paying you this much, that means you have that much in a week, that much in a month. Where are you staying? What are you paying? Like, again, we're not trying to pry into their lives and stuff, but we're just trying to work out, am I giving this person enough to really live? Or am I giving them enough to exist or survive or scrape through or whatever? And again, do a little bit of the research online, chat to people around you, chat to people that you know, treat the people who work for them well, and get an idea of how you can move, if you're not already doing it, towards paying a living wage rather than minimum wage, because minimum wage is very hard for people to live off. But yeah, do a little bit of research. This stuff is easy to find. And maybe just read up a little bit on what living wage means. And I've had people say to this, oh, but I can't afford to do it. And then maybe we have to make some other difficult situations. If I can't afford to pay this person what they need for that many hours, then maybe I need to have less hours, or I need to have less days of them, and be able to pay them what is a living wage, but demand less of their time. And so maybe it's having just a morning instead of a whole day, or maybe it's having them once every 2 weeks instead of every week. And if we're doing that, we must be careful that we're not making their lives harder by saying, okay, I can't afford it, so I'm losing all these days. But I think if we're stepping into that, then we've got to be intentional about how do we find other people where they can work on those days. So I think you can figure that out for yourselves, but find ways in which we treat the people who work for us in the same way that we'd want to be treated, or the same way if they were family members or other people we'd want them to be treated. So it's talking about dignity. It's talking about how do we engage with them? Do we engage with them as human beings, or do we treat them like objects, or treat them just like the staff or whatever? And I think we can do a lot better there. And it's not about, like, people have often had issues with a person saying, oh, this cleaner is my best friend or whatever. There's still a power dynamic. You are still paying for this person to work for you. But at the same time, we can build some kind of relationship around that. So I think of the lady who cleans my house. And we have more than just kind of house owner cleaner relationship. Like I know about her family, she knows about my family. There's a give and take of information and connection and engagement, that when something is a crisis in her life, there's an opportunity, hopefully, for us to step in and help and be engaged. And the longer the relationship is, the more easy that is as well. And I know lots of other people that have a working relationship that goes beyond just you clean my house and I give you money. And so it is about how can I be engaged around how are your children getting to school, those kinds of things. And so we've got to be careful in terms of the kind of relationships we're forming, but remembering that there is a power dynamic. If I'm paying you, there's power dynamic, but it's that thing of humanizing, and I think we can leave it there. 24 is a big one for me, and this is something that I'm super intentional about, and there might be degrees of intentionality that you can find with it, but I think there's a place to start, and I think it's something we can build up the whole time. And it's really this thing of committing to interrupt racism and prejudice. And I came up with the hashtag not on our watch, and when I started using it, I started with not on my watch, but I realized early on that this is a community thing. This needs to be not on our watch. What are the things that we are going to interrupt in terms of racism and prejudice? And this is largely on social media, but it's also live as well. Like, what are things that are not okay, or not appropriate, where I need to say something? It might be your dad making a joke at the dinner table, or it might be the grandparents saying something in front of somebody. And there are gentler and harsher ways to get involved. But the bottom line for this point is just being able to say that is not okay. And we don't have to pick a fight with someone. We don't have to call them names. It doesn't have to get ugly. But there's certain things that as we start to do this work, as we start to realize how are we loving people, how are we connecting with people, how are we engaging with people, how are we treating everyone the same, that certain things are not okay. And so the commitment is that I'm going to interrupt racism and prejudice. That's a commitment I make every day. So whether it's on social media, whether it's live, in some way or form, I'm going to interrupt it and say, at the very least, say that's not okay. And then hopefully in those spaces, there's ways to ask questions about things, to be curious. And that's what my wife Amanda has taught me. I wonder why you say that, or I wonder why you think that's okay to say, or do you think there could be a different way to say that? Or how do you feel that this would land if somebody was talking about you or your child or whatever it is? And so there are ways of doing it very gently. I've got a friend, Jackie Took, who in the days where I used to engage with this stuff a lot on social media, I'd come out like boom, boom, smash, grab, Hulk, kill. And Jackie would come in a lot more gently, and she'd ask questions, and she'd always have facts to back it up, and she'd gently kind of invite people, because that's what we want. We don't just want to shut people down, although I think there are times when it's a loud, aggressive, that is not okay, step back, stop doing that. But more often than not, we try and invite other people into this conversation for people to understand why what they said is hurtful, why the way they are thinking is not okay. And so generally, more often than not, we're trying to call people in. And so I've said call out inappropriate jokes, words, language, and people you know, but also call people in to live a better way. Call people into the work that now you're busy doing as you're listening to this, and you've started to think of things, and you can suggest to people, hey, I started reading people that don't look like me, and it's really helped me to think differently. And so this is an opportunity for you to spread what's happening in you to other people. You can add your voice to someone else's commitment to interrupt racism. So if I'm on social media and I'm going off about things and you don't feel you have the same voice, or you don't feel you can say it in the same way, and there are a lot of people doing that, it's not just me, but then you can share that, or you can tag friends in that and say, hey, listen to this person, or you can quote somebody and say, hey, this is the thing, because sometimes people do say it a lot better than I can say it, and so I will share their video, or I'll share their quote and give them credit and say, hey, this is something that I really agree with. So you can add your voice to somebody else's commitment to interrupt racism. And then you can offer to be a tag ally to your friends on social media. And this is what I've done for a couple of people, where I've got friends of color who, when they start engaging and a white person is getting out of hand, they'll tag me either directly in the post, hey, Brett, come and have a conversation. Or they might send me a DM and say, hey, Brett, do you mind coming over and dealing with your people, in a sense? Like they never say it like that. But it really is about that, because white people should be doing the work. And it can be exhausting for Black people to have to argue and prove themselves again and again and again. So as you build friendships with people of color, there might be those who say, hey, do you mind if I tag you in? Or something that we can offer to be an ally to our friends in that way, and say, hey, if you find the conversations getting out of hand, if it would be helpful for me to come and argue the thing, or to share the thing, or to take it down, then tag me in. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. And then the last one is challenging this idea of white genocide, inverted commas, and other false social media stories with facts. And so it's important. There's a lot of kind of disinformation, especially at the moment. There's been a lot of stuff going on with this white genocide that they call in South Africa, which is not true. But the narratives have been there, and the media's pulled it up, and people like Musk and others and the pod bros and all those kind of guys have been feeding these stories. And so it's up to us, when we see this stuff, to challenge it. And again, this is the not on our watch thing. Just be able to tag something and go, hey, that's not true. But then start building up facts. So as you see somebody else debunking something, maybe they have an article or they have a good argument, we start to learn things. I am a lot better than I used to be 5 years ago, and a lot better than I used to be 10 years ago, because this is a learning process. And I've spoken about how this anti-racism journey is something I'm going to be on for the rest of my life, and you as well, hopefully. And so we start to learn, and we find ways of doing it better. I spoke about Jackie and how she's helped me to be a lot more gentler and kinder and more curious. Amanda is helping me to come at things with a sense of curiosity, and in that way calling people in rather than just calling them out. And so commit to interrupting racism and prejudice. There should be a bottom line of things that you are committed to saying that is not okay. And even if that's all you say at the start, it's just not letting people get away with it and thinking, oh, everyone agrees with me because nobody's interrupted it. So that is a huge one, I think, and that's a way that we can make a big difference. Also, what I've experienced through the years often is Black friends, or strangers even. I mean, it often starts out as a stranger, but somebody will jump into a DM and say, hey, I've never heard a white person say stuff like that, or I've never heard a white person kind of argue these things before. And so this can really help Black and brown people to see that they're not alone in this, that there are people who are trying to be allies, that there are people that are trying to show up and are trying to educate themselves and learn. And so often, by just saying this is not okay, we are helping the people that we're really wanting to reach out and connect with and engage with, to see that they aren't alone, that we do care, that they do matter, and that we're not going to let these things slide. So that can be super helpful. And now we're going to get on to the last five, are a little bit bigger. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the last 6. 25 is this: show up at a protest, meeting, or conversation that doesn't benefit you. And I remember, this might have been 15, 20 years ago, but there was a young girl who was killed in a hiking spot in Tokai Forest, and the whole community, or a whole community of people, rose up and protested against that. And on the same day, there was a young lady who had been killed in a latrine toilet, or in one of the porta potty toilets, in Khayelitsha. And I went and joined the protest in Khayelitsha, and it was a march, basically, just to raise awareness, to honor this person, and to cry out against the tragedy of another life being lost, and just the unfit conditions that surrounded people having to go at night, like walk to this toilet that was being shared by so many people or whatever. And it's not that the one protest was necessarily better than the other protest, but I went to the one that wasn't the natural one for me to go to, because the one was it was a young white girl, and so it was a lot of white people pitching up and stuff like that. And by showing up at this protest in Khayelitsha, a place where white people don't often venture into or whatever, it was just being able to show a little bit of solidarity and just to let people show, hey, this does matter beyond just the people that live here. This is important to people outside. And there's nothing in a sense like that benefited me from going there. But it hopefully had an impact on the people there and started to build some bridges. And so show up at a protest meeting or conversation that doesn't benefit you. I think of when Uyinene was killed in the post office a couple of years ago, and there were these huge protests really looking at gender-based violence and the safety of women. And it was strength to have men showing up at these things, to be able to acknowledge that men are almost always the problem, that men, even though the march was for women and for women's safety or whatever, there was a sense of it was so necessary for us to be there, even though in inverted commas again didn't benefit us, but this benefits society. All these things do benefit us actually when we create a safer world and we create less hostility amongst people. But really just be on the lookout when something is for the rights of teachers or for the rights of those who have to travel by taxi and are struggling with that or whatever. Show up at a protest meeting or conversation that doesn't benefit you, because it's an act of learning, it's an act of solidarity, it's an act of just putting up your hand and saying, hey, I care about this stuff at large. Number 26, invite someone who is doing race work into your company or church. And this starts to cost money. And I mean, company or church are just two examples. It could be your sports club, it could be your community, whatever it is. But actually, we need to start paying people and paying. I've got a friend, Hani, who does this. I've got a friend, Loveland, who does this. Asanda, who does this. They are all women of color, and they are phenomenal. And there are many, many others that do it. And so we need to invite people that are doing race work into our spaces, and we need to pay them. We need to honor what they're doing and acknowledge that actually to undo the past and to undo some of the things that people who look like us put in place, it is worth paying money. It is worth honoring and acknowledging and inviting those who can really help us journey into those things. And so again, you can go online and you can find a lot of them. I can recommend some really amazing people. But let's invite people and let's pay people to start doing the race work, and let's really invest in it. Let's not do like a 1 hour session and think we're done. Let's do a whole program. Let's do a whole week. And I've been involved with some companies that have really committed to it. And so that's what we need to see more of. And let's be doing it. Where you've got a voice or access or authority or whatever, then put that forward. This is something that needs to happen. I think of the schools. There was a school that a friend of mine and I were going to go do some race work at, and last minute they called it off for a variety of reasons. There was just some resistance to doing race work in the school, and so we didn't end up doing it. And within 6 months, that same school was in the newspapers for another thing. We can think of some of the hair things and the uniform things and many things that happen at schools, and the ones that didn't do the work after that, it's just going to keep happening. And so we need to interrupt. We need to help everybody learn. We need to go on a journey together of anti-racism, because again, like from school to work to any spaces, if we're not doing the work of changing things, then they're going to stay the same. Number 27, this is a bit of a tricky one, and I've got the idea of visit a township, but we're not talking about a tour. We're not talking about going in and taking pictures of the black people you hang out with so you look good on Instagram or whatever it is. We're talking about relationship or reason. And so hopefully once you build relationships with people that don't look like you, I remember the first time I went into Khayelitsha was with a friend of mine in Kosi, and we went in and we grabbed some meat at the Shisanyama, and he showed me around a bit, and I got to kind of understand a little bit of what was going on in some of the various spaces, place where he lived. And it was really helpful, I think, both from people living in the community and from him, that I went in with him, that there was a reason. I think of when I talk about having a reason, I know Val and I went in to go watch. There was a theater company, I forget what they were called. And then when COVID hit, they turned into a feeding scheme and fed all the people around them. It was absolutely amazing. But we went in and watched a play. And we went in and celebrated one of the public holidays where they had a lot of different groups of people performing in different ways. There is another space linked to one of the study places where they were showing activist movies. And so we went into Khayelitsha and watched an activist movie in the space. And so we need to find good reasons. But if you, as a white person, have never stepped into a township, then you can't really understand how is it the majority of people are living in the country. Certainly, like a huge number of people, but probably the majority of people are living in this country. And it's really important that we move away. Like, this isn't a tourism thing. This isn't a picture taking thing. Like, I really want to go in humbly, and I really want to understand. I remember a friend, Jonathan Jansen, not the professor, but taking us around one of the areas in the Cape Flat. And we went to go visit him, and we walked around the community, and he was able to explain certain things and talk us through it and show us around. And so it can be so helpful to go in with relationship with people, with Partners for Possibility, and now it's become Citizen Leader Lab. I've been able to connect firstly with a school in Lavender Hill and now with a school in Mitchell's Plain. And so I'm in relationship with a principal in each of those places. And so I was going in connected. And so that made it a lot less weird, I think, for people. That's not just white people wandering around their suburbs. If you think of the same thing happening maybe where you lived, what that would look like, how would Neighborhood Watch respond, and all those kind of things. But I think it's important for us to really understand the context of where we're living and maybe why the kind of conditions that are there, why people act how they do, what struggles people have. And again, maybe there's some story sharing and opportunities there. And again, we're not trying to kind of use Black trauma and Black poverty and struggles to educate ourselves. It's really like a fine line of making sure that we're being humble, that we're really going to learn. But I think it is vital. I think if you've, I mean, another one is drive on a black taxi. If you've never done that, just to experience. And again, go with a friend, go with somebody that drives regularly on it, because if you've never done it, it probably is something that makes you a little bit scared, or whatever. But if you have someone that travels regularly on it, they can show you how it works. They can sit with you. You can have a conversation. You can build your relationship in that way. Okay, getting on to number 28. This is a very specific one, and it's for people with dogs. And you're thinking, oh, here he goes. But there's something about dogs that, especially I think during, probably going all the way back to colonialism and apartheid or whatever, but different people react to dogs in different ways. And dogs were often used in the brutalization of Black people connected to the police, going into areas, having huge violent dogs. And then other people, just normal people with landowners, whatever, would set their dogs on Black people or whatever. So a lot of Black people have grown up with a fear of dogs. And so if you're somebody with dogs, then sometimes people with dogs can be a little bit oblivious to how other people react to your dogs. We think everyone loves your dogs as much as you do. And it's really, like, I've seen things happen when I've been on walks in spaces where people are meant to have their dogs on leashes and often don't. And a dog will run up to a Black person or a Black child or whatever. And that person will be totally terrified. And the person with the dog doesn't even realize, or is just like, oh, don't worry, he doesn't bite. Like, that person doesn't know your dog doesn't bite. And while this should be a true point for everyone, maybe it's a particular separate podcast, people with dogs and how your dogs relate to all people, there are these certain connections where it's been made worse by what happened in apartheid and by how dogs were used against Black people and people of color. And so we have to be incredibly more sensitive than maybe is necessary, or more like overly sensitive and aware that just checking in with somebody, like stepping in between your dog and the person, making sure your dog is on the leash, because too many times I've seen people really not understanding that and not getting it. And it can be something that really can bring terror, can bring fear, can break down relationship. And that feels like such an easy one to get right. So that's a little bonus for people with dogs. Just understand, do the work of understanding why other people may not feel the same way about your dogs as you do. And it's not saying anything about your dogs, but it's saying be sensitive when you're in spaces, especially where there are people of color, where there may be a trauma attached to dogs. And now if you want to go really big, this is number 29. Like, you've bought into the first 28 tips. You're like, okay, I really want to do this anti-racism thing. What have you got for me? Hit me, Brett. 29, move. One of the big problems, especially in Cape Town, but I think around the country still, is this thing of spatial apartheid. So during apartheid, Black people were put in that space, colored people were put in that space, Indian people over there, white people got generally the best land, the best places proximity to city. We've spoken about some of these things. But while we stay in our silos, while we stay living with people who look like us, and this is kind of an extension of that interrogate the places you're in, don't just be in white spaces. Like, this is where you start to go, okay, I'm really committed to this thing. And when I lived in Stellenbosch, and it was as things were as I was starting to learn these things, as I was starting to understand them, I think. But I stayed in town on the back of someone's house, and I was really hungering for community. And so I actually moved into Kayamandi, which is a township just outside of Stellenbosch. And I was there for 18 months. And I was hoping to learn language, Xhosa language. I was hoping to build community, and I was hoping to learn a lot. And unfortunately, as the situation went, that was the time when I met Valerie, and she lived in Cape Town, and so I spent a lot of time out of the township actually building relationship with her and stuff like that. And so it didn't go as well as I'd hoped, but the one thing that was amazing, and it's just become easy, like, because I lived in that space, then I generally find that I can walk into those spaces and not feel scared. I kind of have the feel of them. I know the people. It was amazing going with Amanda, who sometimes works in Kayamandi, end of last year or beginning of this year, I think, to go back there, because I hadn't been there for so long, and it was really cool just to go back in again. But it doesn't have to be as drastic, and I'm not saying, okay, all white people, you've got to go move into a township. But I'm saying if you are moving in particular, but maybe you should consider moving. But if you are moving, one of the things when we came back from America and we were looking at a place to stay, one of the top things on our list was we want to be in a place that has a variety or diversity of people. And so Deep River isn't the most diverse place in the world, but there were certain places that were definitely off limit for us. We didn't want to live in all white spaces, and the spaces even got more diverse as we've lived here. And so I think that can be a super helpful one for people that are considering moving. Be very intentional about where you move to. But if you are serious about this stuff and you haven't considered moving, then that might be something that you go, let's be fully in with this thing. Let's go into a neighborhood where we are having daily connection with people that don't look like us, and let's build into that community. None of us are going to change the country, but we can work in our suburb, in our little WhatsApp group, in our little cul-de-sac where I stay, in our town hall, whatever it is, in the area around us, to start being the change that we want to see in the country. And so we are talking big things now. This started with just read a book of someone who doesn't look like you, and we've got to move, right? And again, we're not saying you have to do all these 30 things, and there's way more things that aren't on this list. These are some of the ideas that came to me, things that I've tried, tested, learned, seen, and which are the ones that are jumping out at you. But for some people, this idea of moving might be something that grabs you, and you might go, oh, that will make it easier. And maybe it will help with things like language or things like understanding perspective and culture, and in being able to find the people to invite to sit around your table and all of that. And then the very last point is just a couple of points, and it's some helpful things to consider. And I'll try to go through these quickly. The first one is one of the key, most important things, that the oppressed get to decide when we can move on. A lot of white people are just like, oh, can't we just move on? Can't we forget it? That's what largely happened in 94. All the laws were repealed, and white people were like, cool, things are different, let's move on. But no changes were made, or not many changes were made. The oppressed get to decide when we can move on. We don't get to go, oh, you're not oppressed anymore. The oppressed will tell us when they're not oppressed anymore. And so we've got to keep on doing the work, keep on stepping towards, keep on building bridges, and be listening. And hopefully there will be a time where we can go, hey, we've got this new society. We don't have to kind of focus so much on this work because we are just peopling together. I think we are far from that, but let's leave it up to them. And then this tricky one. And some of the stuff of the next couple of points is going to be a little bit academic, but I think it's helpful to hear and helpful to understand, especially on social media, maybe where some of us engage, and also sometimes in real life. And it goes like this. Black people cannot be racist, and they can. And so when I grew up with the definition of racism as this idea of hating somebody from another race. If that is true, then anyone can be racist, because we can all hate somebody from another race. We can all be prejudiced against somebody from another race. But what I've discovered as I've been in more kind of activist spaces, there's an academic understanding and an academic definition of racism that includes power. And so because white people had the power to suppress and oppress black people, they could be racist. And black people have never had that same kind of power to do the same thing to white people. And so they can't be racist. So when you hear black people saying black people can't be racist, it is usually, if not always, relating to that power dynamic. And I think what's been very problematic is that you have somebody who grows up with the definition that I had: racism is hating anyone of another race. And so you're thinking, of course, everyone can be racist. And they come up against somebody who has this academic definition of racism. It is power plus prejudice. And so they will go, well, black people can't be racist. And these two people argue, and they're both right because they're arguing with different definitions. And so words are important. It's important that we understand, are we saying the same thing? Are we arguing against the same thing? But everybody can be prejudiced. We can all hate other people, fear other people. But when you look at that academic definition of racism, black people cannot be racist. And this probably speaks to us needing to listen more, needing to read more, needing to understand, because it's been very frustrating for me. Even like, I think the people on the activist side could be a bit more gentle because they're not necessarily realizing that the person they're arguing against has a different definition. And so we've got to make sure, like, are we saying the same thing? Yes. Oh, okay, cool. Or no, I think it's this, I think it's that. Okay, let's figure out the definitions and the words, because then we will get the meaning coming out more. And then on that, reverse racism is not a thing, because that's something that white people often pull out. Oh, it's reverse racism. And that links to those definitions as well. And there's that quote that says, when you are accustomed to privilege, then equality feels like oppression. And so in South Africa, there's been a lot of that with BEE laws, things like that, where we're trying to level the playing field and not doing a really great job. But where white people have had privilege, they've had jobs secured for them, all their kids have been able to go to school, and now it's being more equal, and white people are starting to see that maybe my kids won't get to go to university, as black, colored, Indian kids aren't going to university, and you're starting to be treated or get the same kind of thing that other people have had for all of time. Then you can start to feel like, oh, it's reverse racism now. But reverse racism is not a thing, and it's not a thing in South Africa where white people are still the most employed. We are still holding the most kind of CEO leadership positions around the country. We are still in the most positions of power. We still have the most land, all those kind of things. You can do the research and see that it's not the hardest thing to be a white person in South Africa. I think we're all struggling because the country is difficult. We live in a violent country. Everybody is struggling from all of those things, but we're not struggling from those things because we're white. And so we've got to be very careful about going, oh, it's reverse racism. Because a lot of the time what is happening is that things are being done to try and address the racism in the past. And we might lose some of our privilege. And so in that sense, our lives will be worse. We won't be as privileged as we were before. We won't have things held just for us. We won't have beaches kept just for us. And so suddenly everyone gets to use the beach and it feels like things are being done to us. No, reverse racism is not a thing. And the final point I want to make on this is that there is no race card. And that is one of the things that really annoys me the most. People say, oh, he's playing the race card. There is no race card. There are people who have had prejudice against them because they are of a certain race. Black people have had to endure a whole bunch of things, brown people as well. There is no race card. There's no card of race. There are many things people say, and this goes back to the not on our watch, interrupting racism stuff, where people aren't really making an argument. They're just trying to deflect, and the race card is one of those things. People use it as an excuse. It has no meaning. You are trying to diminish what people have been through and what people are going through when you say things like reverse racism, race card, all of those things. And so I'm going to end there. We've got 30 tips. As I said, there are many more things. These are just some of the things I've learned. Most of them, or a lot of them, I've learned myself, or I've experienced, or I've done, or am trying to do on this journey of anti-racism that is going to take the rest of my life. Thank you for listening this far. I hope you found ways for you to step in or for you to add to the work that you're already doing. And I think one of the most important things is getting other people into this conversation. Who are the white people you know that need to hear those first 10 tips? Because I think a lot of people we know aren't ready to jump into these last 10. But maybe just get people started on the first 10, or get people started on the Amazing Race episode, or the episode on representation, which I think is the It's Raining Men episode. Or even just take some of the things you've heard and learned and start sharing them with people. You don't have to point people to the podcast. Just that powerful idea of letting different voices inform you. Take it to your book club, or take a book and invite a bunch of your friends to read the same book with you. That is by a black author, that is by a woman, that is by someone from another country or whatever. And let's start doing these things, but let's get other people into this conversation as much as we can. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope that together we will continue to build a country and a world that works better for everybody in it. This is a journey, and it's well worth it, because diversity and unity and all of those things, belonging, integration, diversity, those are all amazing things, and they're worth putting our lives towards. Thank you. I'm BrettFish, and this has been Out of the Fishbowl.